Hi, welcome to another episode of the Visual Storytelling Today podcast. The show is designed for you, the marketer or entrepreneur, who may be looking for more effective ways to connect better with audiences through the exciting world of visual storytelling. We will introduce you to inspiring experts from diverse industries that bring fresh perspectives on how to capture attention, build trust, emotional empathy, and last but not least, drive business results. Enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Shlomi Ron, CEO of the Visual Storytelling Institute. Welcome to another show of the Visual Storytelling Today podcast. And the topic I picked today is very relevant to the period we're all living and breathing, unfortunately, these days with lockdown and stay-at-home orders. And since we've been in this situation for a couple of weeks now, I kind of realized there's interesting storytelling dynamic that's really begs the question, how do you adapt your personal and brand story in uncertain times? And the reason I say personal and brand story is because I think they're really connected. For example, how can you tell a really compelling brand story if you are really, concerned and you have worries, economic, social, that really makes you not feel safe yourself? So I want to kind of break this topic today. And for this purpose, I invited two ladies, Natalie Kusturik, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and Jennifer Hudson. She's a corporate communication and Think Beyond public relations. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Shlomi. Thank you.
Awesome. So before we get started, I want to kind of get the gist of what each of you is doing. And let's start with Natalie. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do as a therapist and how you got into this field.
Well, I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for almost 20 years. I don't know where all that time went. I started my career in working with severe child abuse and trauma histories and families, helping to heal from that. And then I moved on to running nonprofits. And then I branched out into private practice and then holistic health also. And now I incorporate pretty much everything that I've learned into what it is that I do now, which is basically taking the chaos and the pain that happens in someone's life and finding the source of the knowledge and the benefit and how they can take what's relatively a negative experience and transform it into something that becomes a positive force in their life and that helps shape them into who it is that they want to be rather than what they don't want.
Got it. Now that's super relevant to this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need me here. Just talk to Natalie.
Well, you see, it all started with a personal story, and then, we can communicate the compelling brand story. So maybe we switch to the brand side. Maybe, Jennifer, you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I have been working in corporate communications as a strategist for the past 15 years. My corporate communications experience in total spans 25 years. Started in corporate communications at American Airlines in Dallas, Texas. I was a Spanish-speaking spokesperson for the airline, and also worked on Sabre, the travel technology arm of AMR. Moved over to Sabre when AMR spun off that travel tech division, eventually landed in South Florida at British Airways. And I've been, after 9/11, things kind of took a tumble, and I've been working on my own as a consultant for the last 16, 17 years. So my work as a corporate communications strategist just involves me helping small to mid-sized businesses and nonprofits really professionalize their communications. And so they tie all of the activities that they want to do to their business objectives. So not just doing communication, not just throwing out a news release for the sake of throwing out a news release, but thinking about whether or not all of the time, effort, and money that they invest in that news release is the most effective way to communicate a message. For nonprofits, it could be, should we be doing a news release to try to reach donors, especially high ticket donors, when we could just be having one-on-one conversations, right? So that's the work that I do, and I facilitate strategic messaging workshops to help companies fine tune their messaging and figure out how to capture what's most unique about them, the target audiences that they should be reaching. And then I do strategic planning, communications planning workshops for nonprofits where I teach them how to develop a communications plan that involves these 4 phases. So that's essentially the bulk of the work that I do.
No, that's exciting. So you definitely in the right place to cover the brand story for us today. That's awesome.
In communication. Good God, how important is that right now?
Yeah.
Right. Every PR person I know right now is focused on COVID-19.
Yeah.
And in fact, so much so that I just did a brief little blog post telling them, even while you're in this COVID-19 period, you still need to be thinking about planning for the future and planning for that future vis-a-vis COVID, right? Because who knows what the new environment will bring. Like we'll
Absolutely.
all have to.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sure I'm getting into the topic.
Yeah. No worries. No, that's a great segue. So as I mentioned in the onset, when I think about storytelling, is nothing but an interplay between the story you tell yourself and the story you tell others. So it's like the internal versus the external story. So to probe a little bit into the internal stories, Natalie, what can you tell us, when you meet with clients these days and they bring up concerns, anxieties, what stories they tell themselves that to help them kind of, overcome their challenges during this time? What are you hearing?
Right now, there's 2 factors that are coming up right now with people that I think are essential to being able to move through this story, this developing story.
Yep.
Is fear and adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
So clients are coming in with a tremendous amount of fear because this external story about COVID-19 is constantly changing. We get bits and pieces of information as we're learning and we're developing. Right. How do you integrate these bits and pieces of information into a way of being so that you can apply it to yourself, keep yourself safe, and continuously moving forward in your own personal development without completely giving up and surrendering like, holy crap, I'm going to die. Right. Which, by the way, is a conversation that I have a lot about is how do I manage my fear so I don't feel like I'm going to die?
Right.
So that's a really big piece of what's going on right now. So there's a few things that I tell my clients to do immediately. One is to manage your input of information that you're taking in. If you're going to take in information about COVID-19, please make sure that you're listening not only to what's going on in the news, but seeking out experts in the field who are doing the research and making your own personal choices and understanding versus taking in this information as a blanket truth. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a developing story, which means you must really learning for oneself is really crucial right now.
Because when I think about this, the Maslow needs pyramid, right now we all in the safety, basic level, everybody's worrying about, either they're going to get infected and even more, simple things like, how can I get toilet paper, basic needs, groceries, staples.
Right.
I'm wondering that question.
Yeah, I mean, this is,
how can I get toilet paper?
Exactly. So
have they sold out of those toilet seats that do it for you?
I guess it's still in the works. But yeah, so all these things, there are really basic level needs that everybody's struggling with. And I'm sure, we talked also about psychological needs, especially couples that are not used to stay at home for long periods of time. Maybe some trouble in the relationship is surfacing because it's almost like you think about it, it's like an experiment in a lab. You put 2 people in a lab for a longer time than they expected. New things going to surface.
There's some really funny memes floating around about husbands and wives who are shocked at the way that their husband or wife interacts with office mates. I mean, it's hilarious. Some of these
there's some good
going around. My husband who never communicates with anyone is like the life of the party at work. Like, who is this guy?
Well, yeah. So
I
yeah,
wanted to, can I comment on the
sure.
information
Yeah.
glut, because the information overload, I know is what stresses people out. I've made a conscious choice
Uh-huh.
to only consume news after my workday.
Mm.
And I'm the president of the Public Relations Society of America in Fort Lauderdale, and PRSA National
Uh-huh.
a couple of weeks ago released you may have seen this, Shlomi, on that. I think I put it on LinkedIn, but
Uh-huh.
it's they released this graphic about the infodemic, that people
Right.
are consuming so much information and getting stressed out, and they were urging people to only get your source of, your trusted source of information from World Health Organization and the CDC, right? Going to their sites, because we're PR people, and we are definitely big supporters of the fourth estate, the news media.
Right.
But even they can get stuff wrong, right? So this is
Absolutely.
such an important topic. So I think it's so great that you are telling your clients, Natalie, to make sure that they're not only limiting their intake of information, but also getting it from the right place.
Yeah, it's actually information dietitian.
Yeah,
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 yeah, a
yeah,
nice
Something.
term.
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's switch perspectives. In terms of, obviously, with your clients, Jennifer, you try to help them adapt their brand story, or how they're going to update their corporate communications to the new times. And what are the things that you are seeing, both in telling a compelling story internally within the organization to employees, but also externally to customers?
Well, this is, you have to think about this as a crisis. And with crisis communications, there are always some best practices that
Right.
you sort of go through
Mm-hmm.
for communications purposes. And first is just making sure that you take care of your staff
Mm-hmm.
internally, and that they
Right.
understand how you're going to respond, what procedures you're putting in place before you communicate out to anyone else. So
Mm-hmm.
one client in particular that I have, um, they they needed to get, it's a nonprofit, and they needed to get all of their staff aligned so that they could continue to provide vital
Mm-hmm.
services. I mean, they serve the population of people who are being most adversely impacted, people
Right.
in underserved communities.
Got
So
it.
they needed to make sure that they could get all of their staff in
Mm-hmm.
place. And unfortunately, the external took a bit of a back seat while they
Mm.
managed that, but that was actually okay in the environment that
Right.
we're in, because everybody's trying to figure themselves out at this time.
Yeah.
But once they posted some things on their website,
Mm-hmm.
but once they were able to regroup, and then we were able to say, okay, what should we really be communicating right now? What do people need to hear from us?
Yeah.
How can we, for lack of a better term, lack of better wording, like take advantage of the
Mm-hmm.
situation
Yeah.
to position ourselves as a leader
Mm-hmm.
in our space, and really, because they're a nonprofit, demonstrate the value that they're bringing to the community, because obviously donations are the lifeblood of
Yeah.
many nonprofits.
Right.
And so it's even more critical that they're communicating effectively, and that they're communicating the value that they're bringing to the community, so that they don't lose that support. And so
But there's got to be a
it's
connection, right, between the brand value propositions and the type of help they extending, right? So,
yeah. So the brand value from the point of
yep.
view of a funder is,
Yep.
are you adequately servicing the
Mm-hmm.
people with the services that I support and that I believe in, right? And as
Got
long
it.
as they can demonstrate that,
Yep.
which they can, because they're
Mm-hmm.
doing the work. They're
Right.
distributing meals to people. They're supporting women who are victims of domestic violence,
Oh,
who
I
right
see.
now have nowhere to go and still need support. They're providing social services support,
Mm-hmm.
helping to direct people to where they can get the best support that they need for those activities, for those programs that they don't offer. And so, yeah, brand value is in the eye of whoever that target audience is,
Yeah.
and so they have to be able to demonstrate that their programming and that the services that they offer are still delivering and supporting the community that they work in.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so messaging is just about being open, being honest, authentic,
Empathy
and
first versus business as
empathy
usual.
first
Yep.
versus selling, right?
Yeah.
And doing that first with your staff, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to take care of your people first. I'm a strong believer in that. So communicating in a crisis, the who, what, where, when, why, and how as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then consistency is key. How often do we need to be communicating so
Right.
that everyone knows what we're doing, so that people don't feel lost and confused?
Yeah.
And then doing that same thing externally.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the crisis communication, but sometimes we see use cases of crisis communication where the company had a glitch in the product and they need to kind of communicate, transparently that they take responsibility. But in this case with COVID, I think this is like a rolling story that it's beyond the control of outside the company that they need to reflect somehow.
And the best companies will have crisis communications plans, or at the very least issues management, right? Issues management requires you to think ahead to what could possibly happen to our business. What are the worst case scenarios? How do we prepare for those worst case scenarios with our messaging? Who will our spokespeople be? How will we adapt our policies internally? How will we adapt our processes inside? So the good companies and the good organizations think through that so that they're not scrambling so much, right? You cannot have predicted, I don't think, something like COVID-19. No. I think you could have, because apparently people didn't know.
I think did, right?
Right. So you could have, but I think there's opportunity here now because the worst case scenario just got way bigger. Like what,
Exactly.
And I don't think it's unreasonable to consider the absolute worst things that we can imagine. That's what crisis communications planning and that's what issues management, reputation management is all about.
Got it.
Identifying and sort of brainstorming where those gaps could be within our operations, within our communication.
So hold on this
How are we going to respond?
Hold on this thought, because I want to expand and come back to it. Let's talk about misconceptions, and this is a question for both of you. Let's start with Natalie. As you talk to your clients and you try to help them kind of untangle these personal conflicts they're having, in reaction to the situation, what are the typical misconceptions you hear about?
Misconceptions in regards to the virus, or misconceptions in regards to...
In regards to how they, need to adapt to the new normal. So things that...
Well, it's interesting because what Jennifer was saying about crisis communication is really very similar to what you have to do to move through the crisis on a personal level, which is being willing to go into your deepest fear. What are my greatest fears, so I can identify what are my greatest possibilities.
Right.
This is a very terrifying space for people to go into. And those who are willing to dive deep into the fear can hold the space and feel contained, which means they have the support, they have people around them, they're able to manage their news feed, they're able to self-regulate on an emotional level, they have developed strong habits in regards to their health and their well-being, have a greater sense of self-control so they could do the deep work, and then emerge with new insights, new ways of being, new ways of communicating, and new ways of relating. When you are in a crisis situation, like a lot of domestic violence situations right now, they're being challenged on an entirely different level. So here we have this external crisis that's happening, that's locking people down. Normally, to be locked down with your family, people are like, oh, I love my family. There's all these cute TikTok videos and everybody's doing all this fun stuff. But when you're in a domestic violence situation, it's a prison. But it's not just a prison in a physical sense. It's a prison in your mind.
Right.
And right now, it is like the personification of that happening. It's really a living entity that's in your space that you need to get away from. So now they're having to manage their minds and get help in the midst of not only an internal threat that's constantly happening, but also not an external threat. It is system overload.
Right.
So reaching out for support and help right now is crucial. You can't hide. There's no more secrets. You can't protect anybody if you want to survive this thing. So people are being forced to reach out. I mean, we just had a client who is now having to leave her husband because of a domestic violence situation. And you know, what's the greater risk, my physical safety with this person that I'm with, or my physical safety in this environment? Well, at least with this environment, there's professionals out there who are going to at least care about me and want me to be healthy. That's a better paradigm. That's a better thought than if I stay here, someone's going to hurt me. So we are in really an interesting time where our fear has the ability to propel us into this next new phase in being in the world, or keep us restricted and contracted and cause us even more severe harm than what it is that we're trying to prevent in our lives.
Interesting.
Wow, that's so interesting, because from a corporate perspective, you know, as I talk to people about the need to think ahead and to begin to plan post-COVID, if there is a post-COVID, you can't be locked down in so deeply in managing today, in fear today. You've also got to be thinking about that future and what that looks like. How are your I mean, I don't know if I should get this deeply into it, but how are your customers engaging with you today? How are you communicating with your customers today? And how can that relationship or that engagement either be tweaked or stay the same in the future, right? And future for me is like, you know, within 6 months. I don't know, unless there's if there's a resurgence, but I still think that it's important to think about to not get paralyzed in dealing with communications today so much that you are not able to project forward and look at opportunities. And I think that one of the biggest misconceptions from a communication standpoint, a corporate communication standpoint, is that you can't sell or brand yourself in this environment. You can do, but it has to be done with a great degree of empathy and care.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the examples I was thinking about was, I mean, full disclosure, my husband works for Citrix, and so I saw he showed me an internal communication piece that Citrix sent around, and then I also saw an external piece that they did, and it was brilliant. It was I was very impressed with they did a press release where they talked about how they had surveyed their own employees about their experience working from home, and they used the results from that survey to talk about how they were supporting their employees and how that was impacting their employees emotionally and psychologically.
No, definitely.
So, and then they used all of that to talk about Citrix remote access technologies. I mean, that was a little cringy at the end, to be honest. But they were trying, and the data that they got from their own employees gave them, I think, a degree of connection with other people who are also going through the same thing. So they took their own employees' experiences and put it into, and so that was an example of how they're managing right now, but going forward to the future, they've also got to think about those types of opportunities.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears and talk about a little bit about the new constraints that this new normal is kind of throwing at us. And what I mean by that is, you know, I just saw an article the other day that talking about new trends in digital. So we have a rise in usage of websites versus mobile apps. We see a rise in obviously video conferencing, online courses. Interesting element, which was surprising, rise in voice calls. People don't use their smartphones for voice calls. Now it's going up. So as I was talking to you, Natalie, earlier, you kind of mentioned that now your clients, like everybody else, are kind of locked down. So obviously your sessions are now moving online. So you're actually practicing some type of telemedicine in a way. So how does that new experience is changing the interaction?
Well, I've been doing online therapy for a long time. It's it's been my preferred method of therapy. I've only been really seeing clients in office probably in the last year, 2 years. So what's been interesting is that it's no longer just being used with my clients who travel a lot for business and have these very high demand lives. Now my clients who are stay-at-home parents or in school or whatever their work situation is are transitioning to online. And one of the things that's really been beautiful to see is how they're showing up and how they're utilizing it. Because they've never thought that they could have this kind of space in their home to feel safe, to be able to communicate really their deepest fears, pains, insecurities. It's all the things that come up in therapy from their homes. And so there's almost a sense of newfound safety that's happening in their homes.
I would also think that when you talk to your clients, like we are right now, and we are all, each one in their own personal spaces. So as I can reveal stuff to you, you can look some visual cues around me that tells you a little bit about who I am, things I'm interested in. And that's another element that you can probably utilize, right?
Yes. And that's something that I've used. I'm sorry. It's a good point because it's something I'm so used to seeing. It doesn't.
Okay. But for us now, just living in Zoom, it's probably,
But on the flip side, I've also had experiences with clients who've had partners listening in on their private session, which led to a whole discussion about personal space, boundaries, privacy, emotional safety. That's elevating the level of the conversation to a new place that they haven't had before. So there's a level of vulnerable communication that's taking place, which when you're talking about crisis communication, you really have to take in emotion into that. How am I feeling? What's going on? How are my feelings impacting somebody else? How is it impacting how I behave and show up? And so that's really, really up right now, is really communicating from this emotional space. And they're doing it from their homes, not their offices,
not in this neutral space.
No, it's not neutral. There is no neutrality right now. It's fully charged, and which means it's because they're being activated in this way, they now, because there's nowhere to go, have to address it and start dealing with it. So we're actually moving from understanding to practicing our new understanding in relationships almost immediately.
So since they're in their personal space, do you find they're more authentic, more open to share more things versus a neutral environment?
I think that's really individual, because there's some people who it's a non-issue for. They're exactly the same, whether they're in the office or not. And then there's others who are reserved and it's going to vary depending on who's around now. But I get to experience, I guess, people from multifaceted ways, because they're going to talk differently if they know somebody else is outside the door versus if they're alone.
I see.
Sometimes my clients aren't in their cars when we're doing this.
Oh, okay.
Because it's their only place that they could go.
Got it. Yeah, it's a moving personal space.
It's a moving personal space. But it's a multifaceted approach. So you really get to see who a person is and really how they live their life.
Got it. What about you, Jennifer? I'm kind of curious to see how are you kind of accommodating your clients to the new constraints, new tools, using Zoom more often, maybe other digital channels that were not that hot before?
No, it's all Zoom.
All Zoom, yeah.
It's all Zoom. And we get so weary of Zoom that I'm not surprised at all. I mean, I'm interested that you've said this, but I'm not surprised because I feel the same way.
Mhm.
I actually just want to talk to somebody on the telephone.
Right.
I don't want to use Zoom as much. But no, all of our activities have shifted to Zoom. Beginning with, I told you as a president of PRSA Fort Lauderdale, all of our meetings have shifted virtual. We were supposed to have a huge event at Aventura Mall that shifted to virtual mid-March.
Yeah.
And this coming week, we're doing an activity just for PR professionals to give them an opportunity to just vent. And that's virtual via Zoom. So,
and interesting use cases that you come across. I know there is the cocktail hours, the weddings. Even I heard
quarantinis.
quarantinis.
People are doing quarantinis.
That's
so that kind of thing.
The Easter meal coming up, probably. The Passover just happened yesterday. Now, evening. So.
Easter services are virtual as well. Easter brunches and dinners are just with smaller groups.
Yeah, so it's definitely changing the environment, I think, in terms of what people can expect. And
I think also that because I think people who had not worked from home before, like I work from home, so this is not that big of a stretch for me. The big change for me personally was having other people here with me. Right. So, right now, making sure that I keep my son in that room and that I close the door where my husband is. And so that's been an adjustment, but I'm very curious to see how we as a country migrate to work from home for people who say, this is actually kind of nice. I don't need to go back into the office. Maybe, and I've been thinking about cost savings as well for companies who don't necessarily have to have all of their staff in the office. Is there some, because I work with smaller businesses, is there some cost savings to electricity and, to utilities from working from home more often? But anyway, I don't know. But to answer your question, everything is Zoom right now. Everything.
Yeah, it's true.
Google Hangout, Microsoft Teams.
So one thing, Jennifer, that you said that I think is really important is working from home means you have to keep people sort of in their space, which means boundaries are a really, really big deal. But how we communicate about our boundaries is really, really essential. So to say, for instance, if you have to share a workspace with your partner and you have something coming up, you can't just say, hey, can you be done with this sooner because I need X, Y, Z? They're going to be like, what, you're more important than me? What's going on here, right? But if you say, hey, you know what, honey, I'm really nervous about what's coming up for me, and I want a little bit more time to set up so that I feel confident and comfortable with what's going on, then your partner gets to go, oh, okay, I can do that for you. So we're literally, in order to get our needs met and to truly have privacy, have to go into a more relational space, which requires us to step into our hearts versus our heads. So we can get our needs met and really have a new sense of privacy that we allow to develop because of how we choose to communicate about our boundaries. So
that's so interesting. So with one client, there is an agency that I'm managing for them that is going through a series of internal interviews with all of their staff. And typically they would do that work in person, right? These one-on-one interviews to really dive deep and understand what all of the different moving parts are. And they're having to do that by phone now. And I hadn't even considered this, but in order to do those conversations, HR had to get involved to get permission to provide their personal phone numbers to the agency so that they can make those phone calls and ask them their series of questions. But it also reminded me that even as leaders are communicating with their staff about work-related issues, they constantly have to have in the back of their minds how people are being personally affected People are managing their kids home, school from home, while they're trying to do their work. And so leaders so much more have to work from this heart center. And it's difficult for parents who have kids at home and doing school to establish those boundaries. But it reminded me of that when you said that, Natalie, that leaders have to, the boundaries that they may have or the expectations that they have in the office don't apply as much right now. Like, people are still expected to do their work. But they have to lead much more so with their hearts in the way that they're interacting with their staff.
Yeah, I think it's sensitivity expressions are really important these days, because we got ourselves in a new context, both physically in a space and also mentally. So how can you manage those two? Definitely interesting. I want to ask you we touched on it briefly before, but I know we don't have the answers, but we're going to play like the role of futurist here. And maybe we'll start with you, Natalie, as you looking ahead post-corona. And by the way, I see this is right now, we before the spike, there's going to be a period after the spike, before the vaccine, and then there's going to be a period after the vaccine is found. So let's talk about, after
life after.
Life after. So how do you coach, or if you need to think about coaching your future client about the post-corona future, what do you think you're going to say to them?
I think that there's a few key questions that are happening right now that can help us to prepare for what's coming down the pipeline post-COVID-19, because we know one is self-care. How am I taking care of myself? What does it mean to take care of myself? When I'm taking care of myself, what is the impact on others? That's a really prominent question right now. Our ability to care for ourselves has a direct impact on the health and the well-being of others. Right. This question of do I matter? The answer is yes. So when you're operating from that place, your self-care, what are the small choices and the habits and the things that you do on a daily basis? What are you doing?
This is also the solidarity and the fact that we all connected, basically, we're all the same boat.
We are moving from self to community, and I'm really excited about that. Time. How am I using my time right now?
Right.
Am I being efficient? Is wasting time if I'm actually connecting to myself and to others who are close to me and or not close to me, and I'm developing relationships. What's the value in that? How do I incorporate more of that into my life? What am I doing with my downtime, my productive time? If you're using your time right, you could do a hell of a lot in 3 hours. You don't necessarily need 8 to accomplish it, right?
Yeah.
Which means if I now have an extra 5 hours, does that mean I get to play with my kids? Does that mean I get to go work out that thing that always went into the background? Now maybe that needs to be in the forefront.
Right.
Resources. How am I using my resources? Or am I aligning my resources with my values, or do I just buy things to buy things?
Yeah.
Am I thinking about my future? What is my future? Do I care enough about myself to think about my future and plan for it?
So it's kind of shifting your priorities in a way.
Yeah, because we vote with our dollars, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So am I in alignment with this company who is, what they've retooled their factories and they're now producing masks? Hell yeah. I want to support
them. Yeah.
I'm going to spend my money there. And we start thinking about that. Our relationships, everything that we are doing is relational. Absolutely everything. We are not functioning alone. Right. This concept of I can do it by myself, that's done.
Yeah.
That's done.
Great point.
That American rugged individualism.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. It's not. It helps in terms of motivation. But you got to take that and you have to spread it across into your relationships, into the people and the things and the community that you are in to be in support of. And that means that you have to use your senses in a very different way, being much more awake, much more aware, much
Right.
more communicative, much more vulnerable with your emotional experience, because literally everything that's happening right now is emotion based. The
Yep.
stock market is going up and down based on people's emotions. So when people are like,
right.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, really? The stock market tells me otherwise.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like a blood pressure read, right? So
It is. But we need to check in with our emotions and really own that our emotional states
yeah.
are very powerful spaces where a lot of information about who it is that we are and what our potential is can be found. Fear can either cripple you, or it could be, as you talked about it, Jennifer, as part of your future planning, which puts you into action, which puts you into the present time, which puts you into your power and helps you create a future by choice, not by default.
Right.
You are not a victim to what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And then community. You can't not consider your community now. It's
Live
essential.
on an island. It's not living on an island anymore.
No. Who's your community?
Yeah.
How are they contributing to you? How are you contributing to them? And you make this part of your day.
Yeah.
I think from that place is where I would coach my clients, because from that space, that's an empowered place where, despite the chaos and this pandemic that's hitting the entire world, it's actually unifying us. If you walk down the street now in China, you can meet somebody you would never have met in a million years, and you have a common experience to talk about.
Sure. Yeah.
That has never happened.
Well, the entire world, in essence, has
the entire world.
Yeah.
We're
not in our lifetime.
So we have the ability to connect with people and share our stories and share it across the globe, and people to understand one another in a profound new way.
No,
so I think these are amazing times.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing what comes as a result of this.
Absolutely.
Me too. You know, I'm thinking about, it's so amazing that you've said this, because I'm thinking about friends I have all over the world, and we are experiencing the same thing. That has never happened to me before, where something that I'm experiencing, my friends in Madrid, Berlin, London, we're all sheltering in place, right? No one can get out. It's Belgium. It's fascinating. Like everybody, we all have this shared experience.
Right.
I'm also fascinated by the fact that technology is connecting us our interaction with technology is connecting us in a very different way.
Right.
You know, we know that social media use in the past has still not helped people feel connected with one another, and I think it's different now. Like our perception of it.
I actually wrote
even
about
the way we show up, right? Like nobody cares anymore that they've got makeup on. We're used to people walking around. You know, it's so freeing, and I think it's so needed. I'm so excited about this.
All the status symbols are going down. You know, you see people as they are. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much your net worth or anything, everybody is in the same boat, driving to the same destination.
Right.
So,
trying to get the same toilet paper.
Exactly. And just before we close, Jennifer, any thoughts about the future for, in terms of advice to your clients, in terms of brand stories that might...
Well, I think I alluded to it earlier. So there is, the anatomy of corporate messaging. Those practices don't change. You've still got to do your research where you understand your customers, where you understand all of your target audiences.
Sure.
You still got to think about what's unique about your organization. You've still got to consider which products and services you offer are most unique to talk about. All of that still has to happen in a strategic way. You've just got to think about it in light of this new environment, right? You've got to think about it vis-a-vis COVID. And that has to, that means, I think, that you are operating from a much more empathetic, and you have to constantly scan the environment and understand what's happening in the marketplace before you can position yourselves. And so that doesn't change. That doesn't change.
No, absolutely. It's definitely a constant mirroring exercise to reflect it back to your customers. So I want to thank
you. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that constant listening, research, talking to your customers. I also think you can't oversell yourself. Like you have to be very sensitive to what's happening in the marketplace. And I think that you've got to be able to do all of that in like this kind of non-cringy way, right? Like be able to be authentic and open and honest. and tell your stories and those stories of your employees in a way that connects you with other people. And the companies who are doing that really well right now, I think, are the ones who are endearing themselves to us, right? Like the company
Definitely.
that's changing over their manufacturing to produce masks, or the guy who was making alcohol and fired all of his employees and is now making hand sanitizer, right? And brought them all back. I mean, those stories, I'm just like, can I buy something from you? You know, I'm forever a Marriott loyal customer now. I wasn't even that loyal to Marriott before, because Arnie Sorensen did that beautiful talk to his staff.
No, definitely. I think social impact program is going to increase in a big way afterwards, because people will realize their power.
Right.
So on this note, I want to thank both of you for the great conversation today. I had a lot of fun with your help to connect the personal story to the brand story, because it's really important these days and moving forward. So before we close, if our audience is interested in contacting you, so maybe Jennifer, how can people reach out to you?
You can reach me via email, jen@wethinkbeyond.com, jen@wethinkbeyond.com. Phone number 305-333-0315. Sorry, you can hear it.
Yeah, no worries.
So that's how you can reach me. My website as well, wethinkbeyond.com.
Awesome. All right. And you, Natalie?
I think probably the best way to reach me is via my website, where you can just shoot me a direct email from there. And it's Natalie Kusturic, KUSTURIC.com.
Awesome. All right. So for those of you listening,
Natalie, it was such a pleasure being here with you.
Yeah.
Too.
Nice same here, Jennifer.
Thank you, Shlomi.
No, absolutely. I had a lot of fun, and hope to see all of you listening or watching in the next episode of Visual Storytelling Today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Shlomi.
Visual Storytelling Today is recorded in Miami, Florida. The show is published exclusively by Visual Storytelling Institute. Learn more at visualstorytell.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on the iTunes Store. Until next time, don't let your big story wait to be told.